The morning sun cast a golden glow over Willow Creek Estates, bathing the manicured lawns and tidy sidewalks in warmth. It was a neighborhood that prided itself on order. The kind of place where neighbors nodded politely, children played quietly in their yards, and the hum of daily life never rose above a soft murmur. The mailman's footsteps echoed softly on the pavement. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint aroma of brewing coffee. Karen Mitchell, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, stood behind her bay window on the second floor of her pristine colonial house. Her gaze was fixed, almost unblinking, on the familiar yellow school bus that had just pulled up to the stop across the street. The bus was late today, which was unusual, and the children gathered in a small cluster, noisier than usual. Their voices bounced against the tidy houses, laughter piercing the usual calm like a sharp knife. To Karen, the noise was not innocent. It was a violation, a crack in the polished surface of her perfect world. She pursed her lips, her jaw tightening. She had always believed that a neighborhood like theirs demanded respect. Rules followed without question, quiet hours enforced, no loud music, no barking dogs, no children screaming on the sidewalks. The rules weren't just guidelines. They were law. The bus driver, a cheerful middle-aged man named Tom, called out to the children, urging them to settle down. But the children, full of morning energy, ignored him, squealing and jostling. Karen's eyes narrowed. This was the last straw. Her phone buzzed on the polished wooden desk by the window. She picked it up, scrolling through the HOA's recent emails, then opened her notes app. Today, she would file the complaint, not a casual note, but a formal, ironclad complaint demanding immediate action. The children's noise, the disturbance, could no longer be tolerated. But Karen knew this wouldn't be easy. She had faced resistance before. Some neighbors valued their children's laughter over the HOA's strict codes. Some even whispered behind her back, calling her Karen the control freak. She ignored them. Her mission was to protect the community's peace, even if it meant becoming the villain. She glanced again at the bus stop. A boy tripped over the curb, and his classmates burst into raucous laughter. Karen's fingers curled around the phone, tightly. Suddenly, a faint knock at the door startled her. It was Linda, her next-door neighbor and longtime friend, carrying a basket of freshly baked muffins. Linda smiled warmly but said nothing about the noise. Karen forced a smile back, but her mind was elsewhere. As Linda left, Karen's gaze returned to the street. The children's voices had grown louder, their innocent joy now a noise she equated with chaos. And chaos to Karen was a threat. She made her decision. This neighborhood would not descend into disorder, not on her watch. Her finger hovered over the send button on her formal complaint to the HOA board. The message was clear. Immediate action must be taken to enforce noise restrictions at the school bus stop. The safety and tranquility of Willow Creek Estates depend on it. She pressed send. Outside, the bus engine hummed, and the children continued to laugh, unaware that their simple joy was about to ignite a storm that would shake the neighborhood to its core. The email Karen sent early that morning rippled through the quiet halls of the Willow Creek HOA board like a sudden thunderclap. Within minutes, the inbox flooded with replies, some supportive, many not. The usually polite, serene neighborhood was stirring, and the controversy was only just beginning. At the next HOA meeting, tension crackled like static electricity. Karen sat at the head of the long conference table, her posture rigid, fingers gripping her notes. Across from her, a group of concerned parents exchanged worried glances. Marcy Jennings, mother of two rambunctious boys, stood up first. Karen, I understand your concerns, but these are children waiting for their school bus. Their voices, laughter, chatter. They're normal, healthy even. Isn't this neighborhood about family? Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Marcy, this isn't just about children making noise. It's about enforcing the rules we all agreed to when we moved here. The noise disrupts the peace, the tranquility we've worked so hard to maintain. A murmur of disagreement swept through the room. Tom, the bus driver from the morning, cleared his throat and spoke cautiously. I've been driving this route for over 10 years, and I've never received a noise complaint from any other neighborhood. The children's chatter is within reasonable limits. I believe we can work together to keep things calm without causing distress. Karen's eyes flicked toward him, cold and calculating. The rules are the rules, Tom. If we start making exceptions, where does it end? Outside the HOA meeting room, the news of Karen's complaint spread fast. Parents began posting on neighborhood social media groups, sharing stories of children's morning routines disrupted, fears that their kids would be punished for simply being kids. The line between order and chaos blurred in online debates, some condemning Karen as a tyrant, others praising her for standing firm. But Karen's quiet confidence hid something deeper. At home that evening, alone in her study, she stared at the latest HOA emails stacked in her inbox. There was an undercurrent of anxiety beneath her composed exterior. The pressure to maintain control was mounting, but so was her fear of losing it. What no one knew was that Karen's obsession with silence stemmed from a place far beyond neighborhood rules. Months ago, her teenage son, Jake, had suffered a traumatic injury. The once vibrant boy had become withdrawn, overwhelmed by noise and unpredictability. Karen's strict rules weren't just about peace. They were a desperate attempt to create a sanctuary, a controlled environment where nothing could go wrong. But the community was blind to her pain. All they saw was a woman willing to fight, tooth and nail, to enforce an almost impossible standard of quiet. One morning, as the bus pulled up again, Karen stood waiting with a plan forming in her mind. She wouldn't just complain this time. She would take action. A bold move that would shock the neighborhood and force them to see her side. As the children spilled off the bus, chatting and laughing as usual, Karen slipped into her car and drove to the curb. With the engine running, she parked directly in front of the bus stop, blocking the familiar yellow vehicle from pulling in. A hush fell over the morning. Parents emerged from their homes, eyes wide with disbelief. Karen, what are you doing? A father shouted. She didn't answer. She only stared ahead, resolute. The bus driver knocked on her window, but Karen ignored him. Behind the growing crowd, whispers turned into murmurs of alarm. This wasn't just a complaint anymore. It was a standoff, and Karen was prepared to hold her ground no matter the cost. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the neat sidewalks of Willow Creek Estates. But on this morning, the calm was shattered. Karen sat rigidly behind the wheel of her silver sedan, parked directly across from the familiar yellow school bus stop. Engine idling, eyes locked on the bus driver's frustrated face. Children, normally full of energy and laughter, now clustered uncertainly near the curb, whispering to one another, their morning routine abruptly disrupted. Parents hurried outside, some clutching backpacks, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The air thickened with a mixture of confusion, frustration, and growing tension. Karen, move your car, Marcy Jennings called out, her voice sharp, but tinged with desperation. You're blocking the bus. The kids need to get to school. Karen didn't respond. Her lips were set in a hard line, her gaze unwavering, as if she were rooted to the spot by more than just determination. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel, From the bus, Tom knocked on the driver's side window. "Karen, please, you're causing a real problem here." His tone was calm, but firm, trying to bridge the chasm growing between them. Karen's fingers slowly moved to the window lock and pressed the button. The window remained shut. A crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalks, their faces a mix of shock and anger. "Is this really happening?" whispered one mother, clutching her toddler close. "She's blocking the school bus?" The neighborhood buzzed with murmurs. Parents checked their watches anxiously, watching their children fidget nervously on the pavement. The bus engine continued to hum, trapped behind the silver sedan. As the minutes ticked by, Karen's refusal to move turned the small street into a silent battlefield. Phones were out, recording, calling, messaging. The incident spreading on social media as neighbors debated, posted, and argued in real time. Karen's own phone buzzed repeatedly. Texts from the HOA board demanding she move. Calls from family and friends warning her to back down, but she ignored them all. Inside, beneath her steely exterior, a storm raged. She thought of Jake, her son. How the noise made his world feel like a chaotic storm, overwhelming and cruel. This blockade was her desperate stand to protect not just the neighborhood's peace, but her fragile son's sanity. But on the street, no one saw the mother behind the blockade. They only saw the woman stopping children from getting to school. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the crowd. "Call the police!" someone shouted. The suggestion caught fire, and soon several neighbors were dialing emergency numbers. Sirens wailed. In the distance, the tension escalated. Karen's heartbeat quickened, but she refused to move. The bus driver, Tom, glanced nervously toward the growing crowd and the approaching police cars. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered. Karen's gaze locked with Tom's for a moment. A silent standoff of wills. The next move could change everything. The first police car pulled up, lights flashing but sirens silent, adding an eerie glow to the early morning scene. Officers stepped out, surveying the situation. Parents shuffled nervously. Children clung to their backpacks, and Karen remained in her car, face pale but determined. "Ma'am," one officer called gently, approaching the driver's window. "We need you to move your vehicle so the bus can proceed." Karen's reply was cold and unwavering. "No." The officer exchanged a quick look with his partner. "This is causing a safety hazard. Please comply." Karen's eyes hardened. "I am protecting this neighborhood." As the crowd watched, the scene teetered on the edge of chaos. The school bus remained trapped, the children waiting, the neighborhood divided, and Karen's stubborn stand had become a flashpoint nobody could ignore. The morning sun rose higher, yet the street remained frozen in a charged silence. Karen's car sat defiantly parked in front of the bus stop, engine idling but unmoving. The familiar yellow bus stood helpless behind her. Children pressed close to the windows, eyes wide with confusion and growing fear. Parents had spilled onto the sidewalks, their faces etched with frustration and disbelief. Whispers erupted into heated conversations. Neighbors split into camps, some furious at Karen's stubbornness, others silently sympathetic to her cause, though few dared voice it aloud. "Please, Karen," pleaded Marcy Jennings, her voice cracking with desperation. "This isn't the way. The kids need to get to school." Karen's eyes didn't waver. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles whitened. "I am enforcing the rules. The peace of this community is non-negotiable." Behind her steely facade, a battle raged within. Memories of her son Jake flooded her mind. His silent tears, his shrinking world, the noise that shattered his fragile calm. This blockade was more than defiance. It was a desperate act of protection. A mother's last stand. The police officers on the scene maintained their calm professionalism, but tension hung thick in the air. Officer Ramirez, a seasoned cop, known for his patience, approached Karen's window once again. "Ma'am, the bus must proceed. You are creating a public safety hazard. Please move your vehicle." Karen's jaw tightened. "I cannot. Not until this noise stops." Ramirez sighed softly. "This is escalating. We want to avoid any trouble." Karen's eyes flickered, betraying a hint of fear beneath her rigid resolve. But she said nothing. Meanwhile, the neighbors' murmurs swelled. Phones were out, live streams capturing every moment. Social media exploded with hashtags. Karen blockade, silent standoff. HOA drama, the quiet suburb was thrust into the viral spotlight overnight. Amid the growing crowd, a voice rose. Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who had lived in Willow Creek for over 40 years. "This isn't just about noise," he said firmly. "It's about a community that's losing its way." Others nodded, but no one dared break the standoff. Inside Karen's car, the engine hummed steadily as the minutes stretched on, turning into an agonizing eternity. Children began to fidget. Some wiped away tears. Parents exchanged anxious glances, torn between support for Karen's cause and frustration over the disruption. Suddenly, a small voice broke the tension. A little girl, clutching her backpack, stepped forward and looked directly at Karen's car window. "Please, let us go to school," she whispered, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. For a heartbeat, Karen's stern mask faltered. Her heart clenched. This was not how she wanted things to be. But the voice was drowned by the mounting pressure from neighbors demanding action. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a sharp sound cut through the morning air. The unmistakable wail of sirens, louder, now, signaling the arrival of backup police units. Officer Ramirez radioed in. Additional units requested. Situation escalating. Karen's world narrowed. The calm she had clung to was slipping. Yet she stayed put, unwilling to back down. The neighborhood held its collective breath. Would Karen move before it came to force? Or was this silent standoff about to explode? The morning air crackled with tension as the flashing red and blue lights from multiple police cars bathed Willow Creek Estates in an eerie glow. More officers poured onto the quiet street, their presence turning the neighborhood blockade into an official incident. Cameras from smartphones captured every second. The unfolding drama now streamed live to hundreds beyond the cul-de-sac. Officer Ramirez, the lead on the scene, stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. You need to move your vehicle now, or we will have to take further action." Karen sat behind the wheel, her expression unreadable. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, but inside, her heart thundered. She knew this moment could change everything for her, for the children, for the community. But she was certain of one thing: she could not back down. "This blockade isn't just about me," Karen said, her voice low but resolute. "It's about protecting this neighborhood's peace and safety. If that means standing alone, so be it." The officers exchanged looks, aware this situation had gone beyond a simple traffic dispute. The neighborhood was divided, and emotions ran high. Parents clustered in small groups, some shouting in frustration, others pleading for calm. Tom, the bus driver, stood near the bus, his face tight with worry. "This isn't what any of us wanted," he said quietly. "The kids just want to get to school." Suddenly, a voice from the crowd called out, "Why won't you listen, Karen? The noise isn't harming anyone. Karen's eyes scanned the crowd, catching the mix of anger and concern. A flicker of vulnerability passed across her face before it hardened once more. Officer Ramirez approached again. "Ma'am, if you continue to refuse to move, we will have no choice but to remove you from the vehicle." For a moment, the street fell deathly silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting, sensing the gravity of the moment. Karen's breathing quickened. She glanced down at her phone. Messages from the HOA board, family, even her son Jake, all urging her to reconsider, but she couldn't. Not now. Suddenly she opened the door, stepping out slowly. Hands raised slightly in surrender. The crowd tensed. "I'm willing to talk," she said softly, voice wavering. "But the noise has to stop. It's not just about rules. It's about my son." Officer Ramirez nodded, signaling his team to lower their stance. "Let's talk inside, Mom." As Karen was led gently to the curb, cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail: the defiance, the fear, the cracks beneath her tough exterior. The officers handcuffed her calmly, explaining she was being taken in for obstructing public safety. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcy Jennings stepped forward, eyes wide with shock. "Is this really necessary?" Officer Ramirez replied. "We're doing what we have to. It's about everyone's safety." The bus driver finally shifted the bus forward, allowing the children to file on hesitantly. But the damage was done. The neighborhood had been torn apart by one woman's crusade. As Karen was placed into the patrol car, she glanced back once more at the street she had tried to protect. Her eyes met those of her son Jake, watching from a window, silent and wide-eyed. In that moment, the entire community realized this wasn't just a simple noise complaint. It was a desperate fight beneath the surface, one that would leave scars long after the morning ended. The patrol car's doors clicked shut behind Karen, the metal barrier sealing her off from the neighborhood she'd fought so fiercely to protect. As the vehicle rolled away, a hush settled over Willow Creek Estates. A quiet heavy with shock, confusion, and the first bitter taste of division. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, their faces a mix of sympathy, anger, and disbelief. Some whispered about Karen's stubbornness. Others wondered if there was more to her actions than just an obsession with noise. Inside her home, Jake sat by the window, his face pale and eyes haunted. The silence he'd once sought now felt suffocating. His mother's crusade had inadvertently pulled him deeper into isolation, even as it tore the community apart. Meanwhile, at the police station, Karen sat in a stark interrogation room, the cold fluorescent light casting harsh shadows on her tired face. The officer who'd booked her, Sergeant Hill, eyed her carefully. "Ms. Mitchell, I've read the reports. This isn't just about noise, is it?" Karen's fingers trembled slightly as she clasped them together. "It's never just noise." She told him about Jake, the accident that left him hypersensitive to sound, the panic attacks triggered by the slightest disturbance. The noise at the bus stop wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a trigger that shattered her son's fragile world. Sergeant Hill listened quietly, nodding with understanding. "That's a tough situation, but blocking a public road puts others at risk." Karen's voice cracked. "I was trying to protect him. Protect all of us." Back in the neighborhood, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting to address the fallout. The discussion was heated. Some members defended Karen's intentions, while others condemned her reckless actions. Marcy Jennings stood firm. "We can't ignore what happened, but maybe we've been too rigid. Maybe there's a way to help." Families like Karen's without tearing the community apart. The board agreed to explore options: noise mitigation strategies, better communication with parents and bus drivers, perhaps even dedicated quiet zones. Meanwhile, social media continued to buzz with opinions. The hashtag #HonchesKarenBlockade became a battleground of voices, some vilifying Karen as a tyrant, others praising her courage to stand up for her son. Among the debates, a surprising message appeared from an anonymous neighbor. There's more to Karen's story than anyone knows. Maybe it's time we listen. Curiosity swirled, and a few neighbors began quietly sharing their own struggles. Children with special needs, families coping with challenges hidden behind closed doors. The community's facade of perfection was cracking, revealing a deeper complexity beneath the manicured lawns. Late that evening, Karen's phone buzzed with a message from her son. "Mom, I'm scared, but I'm proud of you." Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time since the morning's chaos, she felt a fragile thread of hope. The battle over noise wasn't over. But perhaps, through understanding and empathy, Willow Creek Estates could find a new kind of peace. Days had passed since Karen's arrest, but the echoes of that morning still reverberated through Willow Creek Estates, like a low, relentless hum. The neighborhood was fractured not just by the blockade, but by the painful truths Karen had unearthed beneath the surface. At the heart of the community center, the HOA held an emergency town hall meeting. The room was packed with residents, faces marked by frustration, exhaustion, and uncertainty. The air was thick with anticipation, as everyone waited to see how this chapter would unfold. Marcy Jennings stepped up to the podium. "We've all seen what happens when rules are enforced without compassion, but we also can't ignore safety and order." She paused, scanning the room. "We have to find a way to balance both. We owe that to our children, to our neighbors." Everyone, murmurs of agreement mixed with skeptical whispers. Then, a surprising voice broke through. It was Thomas Blake, the school bus driver. "I want to say something. I've driven through dozens of neighborhoods in my 20 years, but Willow Creek is different. This incident has made me realize how little we know about each other's lives here." He continued, "I've seen children on this route with special needs, kids who might struggle with noise or routine changes. We need to be more aware, more flexible." The room shifted, some nodding thoughtfully, but not everyone was ready to let go of anger. A few vocal neighbors shouted, demanding stricter noise regulations, firmer HOA enforcement. The division was raw. Meanwhile, Karen's story was no longer just her own. Families began sharing their struggles, quietly, cautiously, like fragile seeds breaking through concrete. A group of parents formed a support circle, reaching out to help one another navigate the challenges of parenting children with special needs. Back at the police station, Karen was released on bail with conditions. No further disturbances, regular check-ins, and counseling recommended. As she returned home, she was met with mixed reactions. Some neighbors offered sympathetic smiles, others averted their gaze. Inside her house, Jake greeted her with a cautious smile. "Mom, did you see the messages? People are talking, maybe even listening." Karen's heart ached with hope and fear. Change was possible, but it wouldn't come easy. The neighborhood she loved was no longer a quiet sanctuary. It was a battleground of values, fears, and unmet needs. Just as the community began tentative steps toward healing, an anonymous letter arrived at the HOA office. Its contents threatened to reopen old wounds and escalate tensions anew. The letter hinted at undisclosed incidents, complaints suppressed, conflicts buried beneath the surface. It suggested that Karen's blockade was not an isolated outburst, but a symptom of deeper issues festering within Willow Creek Estates. Curiosity and suspicion gripped the community. Who had sent the letter? What secrets were being kept? As the HOA board debated how to respond, whispers of mistrust spread. The once peaceful neighborhood now teetered on the brink of unraveling. In the midst of the uncertainty, Karen found an unexpected ally, Marcy Jennings. "We're in this together now," Marcy said quietly during a private conversation. "Maybe this is our chance to rebuild something better." Karen nodded, weary but determined. For Jake, and for all of us, the fight for Willow Creek Estates was far from over. The tension in Willow Creek Estates reached a boiling point as the HOA board convened a special session to address the anonymous letter that had stirred whispers of mistrust and old grievances. The room, usually reserved for routine meetings, now felt like a courtroom, every eye filled with suspicion and dread. Karen sat quietly in the back, flanked by Marcy Jennings, who had become her unexpected ally and advocate. Despite everything, Karen's resolve hadn't wavered. This was more than about noise now. It was about justice, understanding, and the future of the community she'd risked everything to protect. The HOA president, Mr. Caldwell, cleared his throat and unfolded the letter. This letter alleges that several noise complaints, including those about the school bus, were deliberately ignored by past boards to avoid conflict. It also hints at neighbours turning a blind eye to other disturbances that affected vulnerable families. Murmurs erupted throughout the room. Faces hardened with disbelief, confusion, and in some cases, guilt. Why hide these issues? A resident asked sharply. Because, Mr. Caldwell replied grimly. Admitting them could fracture the community's image and property values. But burying problems doesn't make them disappear. The letter's revelation hit like a shockwave, unearthing decades of silence and complicity. It became clear Karen's blockade was not a rogue act of defiance, but a desperate cry to surface the truth. Suddenly, a voice from the back, Mr. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who had earlier urged understanding, stepped forward. "I've lived here a long time. I've seen families suffer in silence, just like Karen's. It's time we listen, truly listen to each other." Inspired by his words, more neighbors began to share their stories. Parents of children with sensory issues, elderly residents sensitive to noise, families grappling with unseen struggles. The facade of perfection cracked wide open, revealing a mosaic of challenges and resilience. Karen felt a shift in the room, an awakening. The community wasn't just neighbors sharing lawns. They were people with complex lives, fears, and hopes. As the meeting drew to a close, the HOA agreed to establish a noise and community care committee, tasked with addressing concerns transparently and compassionately. Plans were set in motion to install quieter school bus routes, noise barriers near bus stops, and resources to support families like Karen's. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting warm hues over the neighborhood. Karen stood beside Marcy, watching children play safely along the sidewalks, their laughter a tentative but hopeful melody. Suddenly Karen's phone buzzed. A message from Jake. "Mom, school was quieter today, thank you." Her heart swelled, with bittersweet relief. Just as she prepared to respond, another notification popped up. An email from an anonymous sender. "This is only the beginning. Watch closely." A chill ran down Karen's spine. The battle for Willow Creek Estate's soul was far from over. Secrets yet whispered in shadows. Challenges lurking beneath the surface. But this time, she was not alone. With newfound allies and a community awakening, Karen braced herself for whatever came next. Ready to protect not just her son, but the fragile harmony of a neighborhood learning to listen.